Hey everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm sort of doing a dual recording of this so you can actually see my reactions to some of the things I'm going to cover. Today is about mental health, and I came across this thread through one of my bouts with the mental health thing. I suffer from insomnia sometimes when my head just won't shut up and I get a little bit wobbly. So I was scrolling through and I follow this science page, and it just so happened that mental health popped up. So what I want to do today is go through some of these genuinely heartbreaking and shocking responses people have had to their mental health. And this was a thread that was done back in 2018. It popped up today. So as I scroll through, you are going to hear what was said to people, and I am going to break down basically what was awful about it. So if you have come across any of these things and you think, is the problem with me, etc. Hopefully we're going to be able to say that obviously no, it's not. So the original tweet came from a lady. I'm not going to name names obviously for obvious reasons. And it started off with, quote this tweet with the most unhelpful, insensitive thing someone has said to you about your mental illness. And she said she'd start. So the first one, and let's dive right in. One person told me, I don't need medication, I just need to be more motivated to cope with my mental health. Wow. Okay, so first of all, if you are suffering from mental health issues, which we all do in a way, it's not a matter of motivation. Nobody wants to feel down and low in pain and suffering. So to open up, multiple studies have been shown that people aren't actually motivated by being happy. We're not interested in being happy. We just don't want to be miserable, and we don't want to be in pain, which obviously is abundant here in this message. It's like, it's not about being motivated to cope with your mental health. Nobody wants to feel bad. Nobody wants to have mental health issues. But to turn around and say to somebody you're not motivated enough to deal with it, you can't get motivated. When you're in a state of depression, when you're in a low state, your motivation naturally drops. You are low on the hormones that cause motivation. Dopamine causes reward, serotonin causes happiness. And if you're having a problem with these things, then you're not going to be motivated anyway. It's no different than, to put it in a very simple term and not to oversimplify it, if something doesn't make you happy, you don't do it. Now, if you can't feel happy about anything, you're very unlikely to do anything. And this is where you get stuck, because you should be doing something. And this is the conflict that comes with mental health. You want to do something to fix it, and yet you can't. And all it takes is somebody to turn and say, well, you're just not motivated enough. You just don't want it enough. It's not as cut and dry in that. It's not like, I want to go on a diet and lose weight, but I also want to eat pizza. It's like, then you're not motivated to cut the pizza out enough. Yeah, you're right. I guess I'm not. It doesn't work like that. You can't turn around and say to somebody they're not motivated enough to deal with their mental health. Or more importantly, as I've stated in previous podcasts, it may be that actually to deal with your mental health, you are going to have to really hash up and deal with some very, very tough memories and things you have to deal with. And maybe it's not about motivation per se. Maybe it's about you don't know whether you're strong enough to handle that part yet. So you have to dwell in this quite depressive state. So it's for somebody who doesn't know to say that it's ridiculous. It really is. So please, if you are thinking like, maybe I'm just not motivated enough, we're not, it has nothing to do with motivation at all. Okay, next one from a gentleman says, was admitted to hospital with physical pain symptoms with his GAD and health and anxiety. Had a few months back to be given had to be given a sedative Valium. Apologise, I'm reading off of somebody's tweet, so if their English isn't quite good, I've got to try and make it up for you. After a few days, my wife came to pick me up after discharge for the head nurse to tell her, and this is obviously said out of earshot, he's not the monster he was when he first came in. Now, that's hideously insensitive. Again, a lot of these people I think are out in America. So again, we're not going to sit there and just trash the healthcare system. But this does happen. People do come in with a lot of psychosomatic issues. If you're in pain, if you are unhappy, you are ratty and irritable. We all know what it's like. We get bad enough when we're hungry because we're uncomfortable. We're not in a nice mellow place. If you're in pain and you are, showing a lot of symptoms and you're given a sedative, of course you're going to calm down. To refer to somebody as being a monster because they're reacting to a pain response or just a general feeling of being very uncomfortable is very insensitive, and it's not going to make you feel good. It is going to send your anxiety through the roof, because if you have health anxiety, which he clearly stated he does, you're going to be on edge. You're not going to want people touching you. You're going to want more information. You're going to need to be put at ease a lot quicker than somebody who goes in and doesn't feel funny about being in a hospital. So to be referred to as a monster because of you being just generally cautious, which, recording this during the time of the pandemic is very apt. It's like, it's hugely insensitive, and you're not a monster for wanting a bit more information. Dismissing any information that comes to you is very different. But if you do suffer from health anxiety, which will be flaring off on all, possible parts right now, just wanting some more information and wanting to be completely, reassured, it does not make you a monster. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just being open to, you may get some answers that, you weren't expecting or you don't like, but again, you're not a monster for doing that. And it's, because some of these are awful. Let's see. Oh, here we go. And this is from a therapist as well. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to read it out because, Jesus Christ, how can you say that to somebody? Okay. So it quotes, "Everyone has a stressful job. I have a stressful job. What makes you think yours should be treated better than everybody else?" From a therapist after my suicide attempt. I asked if he thought that was helpful. "I'm not here to help you. You need to help yourself." Right. First of all, now I'm not I am a qualified behavioural therapist, right? I don't have a degree in it, but I did do a qualification, and I've learned, and I deal with people all the time. That is probably one of the worst, excuse my language, fucking things you could possibly say to somebody. You are there to help people. You help them by allowing them to help themselves. You don't, first of all, you would never say, "I'm not here to help you." Otherwise, what the hell are you doing your job? Like, what the fuck are you doing being a therapist if you quite simply are not here to help people? That is your damn job. That is exactly what you're there to do. You're there to help people. Now, everyone has a stressful job. I have a stressful job. What makes you think yours should be treated better than anyone else's? The guy has clearly tried to end his life because his job stress is too much. Now, that is nothing to do with the job. That's this guy's ability to handle stress and the stress he's under. The job now becomes superfluous. It's an external point. It just happens to be the environment he's in. Now, what makes you treat everyone else? Because it's him. And that's his point of stress. That's what, there is no such thing as a small problem, because everybody's problems are individual to themselves. Now, there are things that I don't think are a big deal. Obviously, there are things that I worry about that other people don't think are a big deal. That doesn't mean it makes it any less valid, and it should not ever be downtrodden if somebody is clearly this stressed about it. They've tried to take their own life. This is end of the line stuff. As again, in a previous podcast, you don't commit suicide because you're lazy and don't want to deal with it anymore. You commit suicide because you can't physically find any other way to end the suffering. You're not trying to do it to kill yourself. You just don't know how to end the suffering any other way. I have dealt with family members that have actively tried to harm themselves to the point of death. They regret it afterwards because they don't want to die, but they just didn't want to be in that situation anymore. And this was the last thing they could think of that could make it go away, when the medication doesn't work, when the managed stress management doesn't work, when the environment just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse, and you're that low. The one thing you want to do is just get rid of the pain and the suffering. And this is what this man has tried to do. And to have a therapist, somebody who is probably far more qualified than I am on paper, to turn around and be so blasé about it and say, "I'm not here to help you, you need to help yourself, and everybody's got a stressful job." Guy needs to, Jesus, hand his notice in, he needs to be taken off the board. That is horrific. How can you say that to someone? Okay, so these ones coming up are probably something you've all heard before. So a few that are going to pop up. How can you have mental illness when you're happy? How can you be depressed? You seem so happy. So these are the first ones. So again, mental health is not just, when somebody has a poor mental health, that doesn't mean they can't be happy. First of all, happiness is controlled by a very different hormone than your reward system. As I've said before, serotonin produces happiness, dopamine produces reward response. You can be happy but find no reward in anything that you do, because that's the thing that's gone. The serotonin hasn't gone, so you're generally happy, you're generally in a good mood, but nothing excites you, nothing gives you a stimulus, and nothing gives you a reward. This is the problem. This is why you feel down and depressed, because it's the only way you can describe it. You're not unhappy. You're very well aware that good things are going on, but at the same time, nothing gives you any reward. And when you don't get reward from anything, your body's starting to tell you that something's not right. Now, it can be sometimes that in a few cases, it is just the environment you're in, and there is something that needs to be said about that. You do need to sometimes just go, you know what? I'm just surrounded by things that don't make me happy and I need to change. That's very scary. That can be daunting. That's something that needs to be talked through with somebody, which is basically what I do with all of my clients. We actually get them to a point to admit that they're not happy in the situation they're in and we need to change it. Maybe not remove ourselves, but we can start doing things to integrate more of the things that make us happy into the environment, because they've been spending too long giving themselves to everybody else. So it's because mental health, even when I'm having bad bouts on my mental health, I do get low sometimes. I'm a naturally up person, but when I crash hard. I crash for a few days and I tend to climb back up again. When I'm down, I'm not unhappy. I'm just not great, and I'm really not right, and I do feel low. Like for the last few days, I'm happy to admit my head has been in the toilet because I don't transition very well between being busy and not being busy. It really throws me off. I don't know how to deal with it. I get anxious, I get agitated, I get grumpy. I'm not a nice person to be around. That is bad mental health. Now, I'm happy. I don't want to jack everything because everything's crap, but I'm just not right, and I'm more on edge, and I don't like it, and I don't feel right in myself, and I need to go and find a reset. So for people to turn around and just see your outside exterior point and just be like, well, but you're happy, so what's the point? You can't be depressed or happy. It's not how mental health works. This is going to be a reoccurring thing I say to everybody. This is not how mental health works. It is not a case of you're depressed, you're rocking in a corner, you're constantly crying, everything sets you off, you're going to go commit suicide. Mental health is completely multifaceted. You can be very anxious but very happy. You can be a very happy person, but all of a sudden you're very anxious. And panic attacks can come in. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're unhappy. It just means that you suffer from high level anxiety. That's another varying point on the mental health scale as well. You've got depression, you've got anxiety, you've got personality disorders, you've got hormonal imbalances and all sorts. There's so many different things that constitute mental health. The trouble is we try and put things into a box because we like boxes, because then we can decide what box is going on. And this box theory is crap. It doesn't work, and I don't know why we keep doing it. It's like you can't just put things in boxes. It needs to be, if you're going to do it, it has to almost be like Lego. And every block has to be the same size, though. This is the trouble. We try and make blocks slightly smaller than the others so we can narrow it down to a thing. It's not. It's one Lego block that's 4 pieces big and another Lego block that's 4 pieces big. They're both the same problem. They overlap. They link in. You can link other stuff into it, and you can have a whole tree of mental health issues, but they're no one smaller than anything else. Whatever you are dealing with is just as important as what somebody else is dealing with. So don't ever feel that your problem isn't enough because somebody else may be suffering from something you think is worse. Okay, next, what do we got? Jesus Christ. You really don't need meds, just be happy. Again, as we've said, it's like saying don't be sad. I mean, yeah, like it's that fucking easy. Yeah, just don't be sad, And I've actually heard this advice from people who claim to be mental health experts. If you don't want to be sad, just don't think about being sad. Yeah, because that's where the depression comes from. You're just thinking yourself into a hole. It's just like, don't speak. Jesus Christ. Oh, wow. Our HR department told me they just needed to be more positive. Yeah, again, that's that whole, I'll just be positive. Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm cured. Fuck me. Why has nobody said that to me anymore? Why have I not said that to myself? I'll just be happy. I just won't think about being sad. I'll just be more positive. I'm going to think about all the cool stuff that I have. That's not how it works. It isn't how it works. We are far more complex than just thinking ourselves into a state of being. It's like an amazing quote is that our brain is predominantly fat with water in it and some neurons, and in this hallucinated calculus way back when, like we are very complex creatures that have massive emotional capabilities and responses, and we can be thrown off by very simple stuff. A matter of just not being positive enough is not what this is. And it's there's so many institutions that aren't designed to deal with mental health properly. They don't want to deal with it, so they give you a really shitty answer and they expect you to go off and deal with it yourself. And it's got to stop. But until that happens, we have to have conversations like this. Okay, another... I deal with this far too much, and sometimes personally. Just because you've had a bad childhood doesn't mean you're mentally ill. Oh. Okay. Now, yes and no. Because you've had a bad childhood doesn't excuse behaviour as an adult, because you are an adult and you are held accountable by the laws of other adults, but it does 100% model the behaviour that you're showing, good or bad. I myself haven't had I didn't have a bad childhood, but I sure as hell didn't have a fantastic one. One side of my childhood, if we were to split this down into two pieces, one side was absolutely perfect. You know, I did have loving parents that nurtured me and wanted me to do well and have always supported me. On the other side of it, I did have a parent that had mental health issues and was incredibly explosive and abusive physically towards me. And I was bullied in school for being overweight a lot. Like, I didn't escape at any point. I was permanently on edge, but I am very lucky that I am a generally up person. Genetically, I inherited something from my dad's side of the family, which just means we are able to just reset every day and get on with things. And even when we're feeling down, we can still push through. And I am lucky. I am not going to turn around and say that, you know, and this is the trouble. These are the people like me that should, you know, being in the position I'm in, I can take on a lot. I process it. Tomorrow's a new day. It might be better. Other people who think like me don't then look at people with mental health and go, look, I know that I'm lucky in that I can burden a lot and then I can blow it off because I'm very talkative. They just turn around and be like, well, you just get on and deal with it, don't you? Like, you just, you know, you just because you had a shit childhood doesn't mean you're fucking mentally ill. In a lot of cases, yes, you are. Not in the classical senses that you may not be depressed anymore, but it may have driven an eating disorder. It may have driven an anxiety disorder. You may not be able to interact with people on the same level because you've been ingrained in that it's not the right thing to do because if you screw up, the consequences are too bad. Childhood trauma causes massive amounts of adult issues. And I deal with this quite a lot with my client base. And it's first of all, it's understanding that the actions of your parents are not your fault. They're grown adults and they have to deal with it. There's usually a knock-on effect. So their parents weren't great and their parents weren't great. Or there was things they had to do and there were struggles and hardships and stuff. And this is what's happened in my family. You know, like I can trace back my mum's issues to her mum and then her mum. You know, it goes way back. But it doesn't excuse behaviour because there is still things as a society we've deemed acceptable that has to be taken into consideration. But at the same time, yeah, it can mean that you are mentally ill. It just may not be what people are trying to say is that, you know, it happened in your childhood. Why is it affecting you now? You should have gotten over it. Well, why should you? Why should you get over anything? You know, it's like grief. Grief is as long as you want to grieve for. Nobody has the right to tell you should be over that by now. You know, if you are grieving for a lost childhood, until you find a reason to not grieve, you are always going to feel, you know, taken aback by that. And nobody has the right to turn around and say to you, oh, well, you know, you should have really gotten over that by now. You know, Jesus, why? There are people that something's been said to them once as a kid and it's never gone away from them because it's stuck in their head. It's how your brain works sometimes. So to say that just because it happened in the past means you shouldn't really be feeling it now, absolutely not. That is one of the biggest no-nos. Like, it just doesn't work like that. I kind of wish it did because it would make a lot of adults that I know a lot happy and we could move forward. And I generally just want to see them not hurt anymore. But sometimes it is like we just have to deal with it. We have to revisit it, which is hard because that's the point of most trauma because you don't know how to rationalise it, which then obviously causes the problems we've got now. Okie dokie. Okay. The first doctor I saw about my anxiety said, well, being unemployed is hard for everyone. Like, yeah, but I would have a job if it wasn't for the fact I had really bad anxiety. A rethread was being told you need to just stop worrying. And then the other one was, and by my doctor, you'll be on a waiting list for a long time because you know you're not jumping off a bridge yet. Jesus, like, wow. How do you even word that? So you're given the option that you're not going to be seen because you're not suicidal to somebody who may have the potential to become suicidal, and you should be trying to stop that. But by telling them that they won't get help until they get to that point, you're going to push them into doing it, if that makes any sense, because that's exactly what happens. Right, so anxiety is a very real thing. It's not the same as being anxious. Like being upset that you've got something wrong or you're being questioned is not the same as having a panic attack. It's not the same thing. That's one of the things that annoys me when people turn around and throw this word around too freely. I've got anxiety. You may get anxious about things, but that's normal. Being anxious and nervous are very different to anxiety. But in this case, obviously, clearly this person does have anxiety because it's stopping them getting a job. And I've dealt with people that have done that before. I've had clients that have such bad anxiety that they were having actual full-on anxiety attacks in the car park before they got into the gym with me. And we just have to wait and come back next day. There's no pressure. It doesn't matter. I'm still here. Let's keep going. And this is the problem. Like, the anxiety does this to you. Anxiety really does overplay scenarios in your head. And the trouble is, if you doubt yourself even slightly with anxiety, you assume the rest of the world does as well. So this poor girl has clearly got to the point where she doesn't feel good enough to get a job, or she feels that she's going to mess up, she's going to slip up, she's going to fudge the interview. If she does miraculously get through the interview, then all of a sudden, like, she's not going to be good enough to do a job and she's going to get fired anyway. These are the thought process going through her head. It's probably not the case, but your anxiety is a heightened adrenaline response to a perceived threat, whether it's there or not. You are perceiving too many threats that could happen rather than assessing each one as they turn up. Now, that could, again, be due to childhood trauma. She could just be a naturally slightly more neurotic person, which is a personality trait. One of my daughters has it. She does get very anxious about things very quickly. And this is the thing as well. Mental health and personality traits go hand in hand. Now, most people don't know what their personality traits are. You can do quizzes and stuff, and they're absolutely awful because they put you in a box. People aren't in boxes. People don't live in boxes. You're not, I've done one of the best personality courses there are by one of the top personalities psychologists there is. I'll put the link in the thing and you can go do it yourself. It doesn't cost much to get your own reading done. I think it's about £10. You don't have to do the course, but you just understand a little bit more about yourself. And then if you want to talk to me about it, we can go into it in a bit more detail. But the trouble is everyone's like, oh, what are you? I'm me. I'm a human being and I have feelings and I deal with things in certain ways. And if you are naturally more neurotic, withdrawn and volatile, which tend to come hand in hand if you suffer from anxiety, you are going to overthink the worst case scenario very quickly and it's going to cause you to bomb out. And this is what this girl is saying. Like, I'm so stressed out about being unemployed because then that holds a whole host of problems, and the doctor clearly doesn't understand how mental health works, or more importantly how anxiety works, again because it's a different subsection. Well, being unemployed is hard for everybody. It is, but the reason she's unemployed is because she can't get to the point of being employed. So again, and so that's the first bit. And this whole you'll be on a waiting list because you're not jumping off a bridge yet, that's like saying we're not going to treat you for sepsis yet because you haven't lost a finger. You must treat these things before they manifest quicker. And if you are on a waiting list right now from a doctor because this is basically what they've said to you, I can only say that I'm so sorry that it's come to this, and please reach out to me and I will help you out any way I can to try and help you deal with it before it gets to that. Yes, the health services are burdened. They have no idea how to deal with mental health. No health service in any country that I am aware of has any real way of dealing with mental health properly yet because we don't understand it enough. This is the first real time that our civilizations have been this big that we've had to deal on it on such a scale. Beforehand, there is merit to this. Back in, like, if you look at the people that are still in tribal places and like in Africa, Aboriginal lands, the Amazon, Indonesia, most places that live in small tribes. If somebody has a problem, the tribe comes together, they go see a healer, a shaman, they talk, they take their hallucinogenic drink, and it's basically designed to get you to open up about what's going on. Or, the group will decide what's going on. We don't do that here anymore because our groups are so large. the town, the village can't come together to help the individual because there's too many individuals that need the help. So they get pushed away. Well, you need to go and deal with that. We're dealing with everybody else who has mental health issues. It's the system needs to understand that it needs to be a community-based thing that helps everybody. You can't just put somebody on a waiting list, because that's going to make somebody feel worse, because it either invalidates the problem that they've got, it makes them feel they're not worthy of help, or more importantly, you're then going to have to deal with somebody who's suicidal. It doesn't make any sense to do it like this, but that was that person's experience, and I can only feel for her, really. It's just hard work being human sometimes, isn't it? Oh, fuck me. Okay, next one. My old boss. A mental illness, name, but I thought you were cleverer than that. Which has been retweeted with somebody else who said that they've experienced, I didn't think you were like that or one of those. You're not one of those. You're not like that. It's how you are. You're not a special breed of person. It's not like you're a mass murderer or a sociopath. You have mental illness. We all have a degree of it in some degree. Some people don't. Some people are generally fine. But there's always something that isn't completely set up right, because we're human. We have faults and flaws. Animals have faults and flaws. Jesus Christ, you get over neurotic dogs, for God's sake, that don't want to go outside. It's like there's mental illness itself is so widespread, and this is the trouble. Unless you're sat there rocking in the corner, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, the most intelligent people usually have mental health disorders. They generally do, because they are able to experience and process and feel more things, because they open themselves up to it. So on my personality scale, I am very high in extroversion. I'm a very high in intellect as well. That doesn't necessarily mean IQ. It just means that you have an abundance of, you want to learn things a lot, and you will pursue knowledge that you don't know. Now, once you learn more stuff, that's knowledge you have. Now, if you decide you want to learn about the Holocaust, and all of a sudden that really triggers something in you, that you open yourself up to more things, the more cleverer you are, and the more open to new experiences you are, because you open yourself up to all that anguish. And there's sometimes something to be said about being closed off, because it makes sense. As a protective mechanism, it works. The more you close off, the less you experience. Now, that doesn't work as a human being, because we need experiences, but it is a great safety mechanism. If you don't experience something, you can't get hurt by it. So to turn around and say to somebody, they have a mental illness, but I thought you were really smart, is completely ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense that would be the judgment that you make. And to be labelled as one of those, just you can't punch people apparently. But that's an awful thing to say to somebody. You are not a thing. You are not one of those. This is the whole thing in boxes, and it's just awful. Okay, these threads go on and on. It's wow. I'll put the link in if you want to read them as well. I mean, they were a while ago, but yeah, I guess you can. Maybe, I don't know. I might not, because there's names and stuff, and I don't want people getting in trouble for me spreading their stuff around. Okay, once while explaining to somebody about a PTSD flashback and triggers, the reply was, "It's not like no one can prove otherwise. It is, as it's all in your head." Which has a few retweets, which is very similar to one of mine. Somebody said, "I get told that I'm crazy and it's all in my head. Stop pretending and get over it." Yeah, and wow. So PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is caused by usually prolonged exposure to a stressful or traumatic event. So you can get it sometimes from acute events, but that's more, that would probably come under more of a phobia than a PTSD, which is why people in abusive relationships suffer PTSD a lot. And slamming doors can trigger them off, because door slamming is can be a sign of aggression. Obviously, if you're frustrated, you'll slam a door, but it's one of those things. People raising their voice, people being told a certain word, people going to certain places can trigger people off, because it triggers that memory and that response. And the PTSD is because it hasn't figured out why it happened yet. It can't necessarily make sense of everything. Soldiers get PTSD because they do. You become you dehumanize when you join the military, and this isn't a dig at any soldier, because this is, I mean, it's been this way since the Romans under Marius's reforms created the first sign-up army that you could actually do active service and get a reward from. Before then, it was just the nobility that were in the army. Like, it's been around for over 2,000 years, this method. Your enemy is the enemy. They're not human, because it's very hard to kill another human being. It's very easy to kill an enemy. You are told that these people are monsters, and some people are. Some people absolutely are. And then obviously once you've started taking a few lives and you realise that these people are just people that are probably been told the same thing you are, it becomes very traumatic, and your brain can't figure out why. Or more importantly, it realises that you are in fact have every potential of being the monster that you're trying to eliminate, because we're all human. You know, we could all be that bad or that good. You're also constantly on high alert. You know, every time a bang goes off, it could be an attack. Every time you hear something whiz past, anytime there's a small pop, it could be a bullet. You know, you're constantly on edge. And when you're constantly on edge, you learn to be constantly on edge, which is where PTSD comes from. If you're in an abusive relationship or you've had an abusive childhood, you are constantly on edge because you don't know what's going on. Your body can't figure out whether it can relax or not, so it becomes a permanent state of being stressed out. I worked with a fellow who was in the army, and he was serving within the British Isles, and his two friends who he grew up with, went to school with him, they joined the army together, they were in the same regiment, they were blown up next to him. Very traumatic event. He had survivor's guilt, couldn't realise why he was the one that was still alive and not them, and simply driving through his home village would send him on a depressive spiral because he saw places where there were memories attached. Again, your brain is a very complex thing, and just like by simply driving through his town, which wasn't far away from where he was currently living, would set him off, and it would be really bad, and he didn't know what to do, and he was angry all the time because that was his response, because he just didn't understand why he was still here and his friends weren't. So he now lives out in Malta. Even his therapist, he had a very good one to be fair, said that you can't be around here anymore because it triggers you off too much. That's not running away, that's realizing that being somewhere that's going to drive you into the ground is probably not a good place to be. So PTSD, flashbacks and triggers are very real, and the trouble is they're so individual to you. You know, you and another person can have a very similar experience and have very different flashbacks. So yes, it is in your head, but that doesn't mean that it's not real and you can't prove it, because you don't need to prove it. This is what's in your head. I got told that I'm crazy and it's all in my head. Stop pretending and get over it. It's not a matter of pretend. You're not imagining traumatic experiences, because we don't. Because they're traumatic, and why would we want to do that? We may act them out with toys and stuff, which is again another way of seeing about if, you know, there's a reoccurring theme that always happens. You know, it should be investigated, and that's usually in children. But it is all in your head, but it's not pretend, because if you've experienced it and your body is trying to figure it out, or your brain's trying to figure it out, it's going to keep replaying these moments until you come to some conclusion. Now, because they're traumatic, you are going to shut them off and you're going to try and run from them, which is why using therapy to help disseminate and dissect it into different situations where there's less emotions involved would be very helpful. But yeah, to be told that you're crazy and stop pretending is just, it's all just awful, you know. But the reason I'm going through this with people is because you've probably all heard these at some point, and I'm trying to emphasize that, you know, the help's out there, and it's not you're not in the wrong for having mental health issues. Jesus Christ. Okay, about my anxiety. We all worry sometimes. When I told a therapist I was having problems with food and eating, do you just not know how to cook? Fucking hell. Wow. And again, this is from a therapist. It's from a therapist, and I get shit off therapists when I turn around and say sometimes these practices don't work because you're not in an environment for people to open up, and I get crap because they're like, well, what do you know? You've only done such and such. It's like, again, I work with people, and this is real. There are real life examples of therapists being fucking shit. Food and eating generally comes down to control disorders, in my experience working with clients with food disorders, it is a control thing, it is an emotional thing. Food is a huge trigger because it is the only thing we can control. You can't control the quality of the air that you breathe, you can't control the water that you drink, but you can control the food that goes into your mouth and how long it stays in your body for, which is where in some parts where eating disorders come from. There's also a disgust mechanism where people that are highly conscious to disease and disgust and stuff may actually find themselves shunning away food because they see it's unclean because it hasn't been prepared in a certain way that they deem acceptable in their own head. So that again is something that to be feared of. It has nothing to do with if you know how to cook or not, because in the nicest possible way, over the last 20 odd years we cook less anyway. So again, like even if you just know simple, sociology, you know that people don't cook as much as they did 20 years ago anyway, or 20 years before that. So that's just a horrific thing to say. And eating disorders are very fragile. If you have one, please maybe do a little bit more research and don't just go to see a therapist. You need to find somebody that really does specialize in eating disorders because they're very fragile and emotionally connected. So to go to a normal therapist that maybe doesn't deal with eating disorders, they're not going to know what's going on. They're trying to find the easiest option to give you an out, and it's like it doesn't work like that. You should be able to say, like, I don't know what's triggering you off yet, but we need to find it out. You sound like Vincent van Gogh. We all know how that ended. Doing okay in spite of what was said, made it harder, not easier. Wasn't much on that. You just need to start training again. You should come powerlifting. That will fix it. Now, on that one, the one above it about the Vincent van Gogh thing, because there's no context, I can't really discuss it too much. I wouldn't know what was in context of. Obviously, he went on a downward spiral and started mutilating himself and eventually killed himself. I'm assuming that's where they were getting at, to which point, if these are the trigger signs you're worried about, they should really be saying, look, come on, we need to go find you some help if that's the way you see it going. Just to be snooty and say, oh, well, chuck an artist out there is not really going to help. Now, the thing is, in theory, he's right, because by doing physical exercise and improving your health, you do improve your mental state because you release endorphins, which allow a bigger dopamine rush. So if you're low, it can help. I am what's called an integrated therapist. I use personal training and mental health to help my clients. So fitness is a big thing. And I do use powerlifting to help my clients that have anxiety and have issues because it makes them feel stronger. And when you feel stronger with physical things that you can see improving, it then allows you to carry over into the mental state and vice versa. So yes, actually, the guy wasn't wrong. It was just very poorly put. So, and it isn't going to fix everything. It's not like, we do need to make body and mind work together. They do like a DNA strand, a counter helix. They do, interweave. You can't have a healthy mind with an unhealthy body and vice versa. If the body's not looked after, the brain will start to suffer. And if the brain isn't looked after, the body will start to suffer. You've got to have them both working. So in that sense, yes, doing exercise and say powerlifting to build your confidence, you get stronger, you feel better, is technically not a bad approach. But it's just a bit of a throwaway comment to somebody who's saying they're really struggling with their mental health and going, no, mate, you just want to come do some training with me. That'll sort you out. It needs to be explained better than that as a method that is used. Every support line ever. The only reason I laugh is because I've come across people like this, and I'm going to give you an example in a minute. Okay, we didn't win the war by getting depressed, Funny, you look all right to me. Yeah, a doctor, seriously, pull yourself together immediately. Are you pulling a fast one? Depression, rubbish, it's all in the mind. Okay, so we won't do the one that made me chuckle first. Funny, you look all right to me. Again, it has nothing to do with how you look, it's how you feel. There are people that look like they're falling apart and are the happiest people in the world. It has nothing to do with external appearance. And also, we're not stupid. We understand when we're feeling down that we don't, and you may not want questions asked. So you may actually put on a brave face. A lot of people do. And we make ourselves look like we're all together and we're fine, we're happy. And it's not to judge. Don't judge a book by its cover. Basically, you don't know what's going on underneath that exterior. It's maybe just a defense mechanism to make people not ask questions. And yet, when someone opens up to you, yeah, but you look fine. Might want to just hold back on saying stuff like that. Doctors themselves are not designed to deal with mental health. They're not therapists, just like they're not nutritionists. If you see a GP, they're a general practitioner that will probably try and help you in a certain way, but they're not specialised in anything. A specialist only deals in one certain area. So you've got to be very careful with doctors. Unless they specialise in mental health and therefore basically a therapist, they're not the people you need to talk to. They are there to go to advice to see who you need to see, but maybe taking advice from them isn't the best option, or at least take it with a pinch of salt, because they aren't a therapist. Pull yourself together immediately. Fuck me, if it was that easy, we'd all do it, wouldn't you? Are you pulling a fast one? Because people will abuse mental health and use it to get advantage sometimes because it's such a hot topic, this is where this will come out. It's not you, it's not your fault, it's everybody else who claims mental health falsely to get out of something. And it's a terrible thing to do, but it also tells you the shape of the way we work right now, that we're willing to mimic and falsify mental health for the sake of trying to get out of a job we don't want, etc., etc. So, again, it may not be you, it's just, unfortunately, a product of environment that people will use this as a means to get out. But you're not pulling a fast one, and again, just maybe ask somebody else about it and stuff. Depression rubbish, it's all in the mind. It is all in the mind. You are very correct, whoever said that, but it's not rubbish, because clearly you don't understand it, and you don't understand how complex the brain is. But I suppose you're half right. It is all in your head, but it's not rubbish. It's not like you're not imagining depression. Nobody imagines depression. Trust me. Nobody wants to go down that road. It's not something you manifest for a jolly at all. We didn't win the war by getting depressed, Now this is like every grandparent / great grandparent ever. They were conditioned with a stiff upper lip because there was no other option. Now, being resilient is something that should be retaught, because too many people fall apart at the smallest inconvenience anymore. And that isn't because of mental health more so, that's because everybody's used to getting what they want, and when they can't get what they want, it throws them off and they don't understand why not. These people had the opposite. They never got what they wanted, they just had to deal with what they had. And now that has built a very hard resilience up that has gone too far. God bless her, my grandma. She, we're talking about COVID, was one of the first ones to say, well, I don't know what all the fuss is. When we were growing up, we had polio and measles and tuberculosis. And it's like, it wasn't a good time to be alive. And I said this to her, it's like, it wasn't the golden age of health. It was like tuberculosis knocking on the door every day. Anybody dead today? I'll come back tomorrow. No, but the trouble is they were built with such a high resilience to negative things, and they just had to get on with it, that they don't know how to lower that wall down. Some grandparents are amazing, and they really are, and there's nothing wrong with being resilient, but there's a line where they don't know how to change it over. So if somebody says that to you, they're probably of a certain age, it's not their fault, but they had their own shit to deal with. They just haven't learned how to soften up into the new age where mental health is very different now. You're not dealing with shell-shocked soldiers and bombed houses and stuff, and then the depression that came afterwards. It's like, because there was no state to look after you, you had to just deal with it. So that's what they've gotten used to doing. All these wobbles, panic attacks, are just really inconvenient, aren't they? It's making it really hard for us to go out anywhere. Person, sorry, but I don't have any control over it. Haha. I mean, maybe you think that. Now, I actually deal with clients that have had partners in the past that have said things like this. They are pieces of shit. Sorry, going to say that. Because if somebody's having a panic attack or a wobble, we call them wobbles because we don't want to be as dramatic as a panic attack, and that's such a weird thing to do because a panic attack is actually quite dramatic. They are, and I don't like the term gaslighting, but in this case, that's what they're doing. They're basically making you feel invalid about the fact that you are anxious. But rather than trying to find out why you feel anxious, rather than trying to go, right, okay, well, clearly there's something that's triggering you off. What about it is that, anxiety is very real, especially in social situations. If you aren't sure how you're going to react, you're worried about if people are going to like you. Are you going to embarrass yourself? Are you going to embarrass your partner? If your partner doesn't give you the confidence sometimes to go, look, no matter what happens, I'm going to have a good night. you can feel very on edge, and it will cause you not to go out. And this happens very often. It's usually in a relationship that is abusive, psychologically, not always physically, but maybe sometimes. But this is something that needs to be picked up on. If somebody is turning around and saying to you that your anxiety attacks are inconvenient to their life, maybe they don't deserve to be in your life, because they're clearly not doing anything to help you, even if it's just a case of like suggesting, look, okay, well, if this is getting this bad, maybe we need to figure out why it is. Or even just asking you, saying, oh, why do you panic so much about these situations? You may not know, but at least if they're asking, it's showing that they're trying to find a solution rather than just dismissing it as inconvenience. Now, I will apologize for you. I'm sorry that your life inconvenience is somebody else's, but at the end of the day, it's not like you don't want to go out because you don't like any of that person's friends. It's like, look, you're trying to, but there's something physically holding you back, sometimes quite aggressively. So it needs to be addressed. So if anybody says that to you, just start, maybe looking at other options. Yeah, so this is like what I was telling myself was worse than anyone could have said to me. To be fair, I was my own worst enemy. That happens because people aren't supportive or they don't understand. There's a lack of understanding. So you will amplify it, because the trouble is you're trying to hold yourself to a standard of society that you're around, and because nobody else is feeling the way you feel like you're broken, you feel like you're not 100%, you don't function the way you should do, which of course is you're no lesser a person because you have a difficulty. It doesn't mean anything. You're just struggling with different things. Everybody struggles with something. Everybody does. It's just some people will either don't want to address it, they address it very well, they're very open about their vulnerabilities, or they have a better support network. So just because you've said something to yourself in your head that's worse, it doesn't mean, you don't beat yourself up about it. That's what mental health does. You're trying to judge yourself enough that you either break out of it or that you accept it, and it just never works. Someone said to me, you are far too young to have any problems or anything to worry about. When you're older and have responsibilities, then you can have anxiety. This person's 20, by the way. We often joke, and I've said it before when I talk to younger people. When I was a doorman, I used to get this a lot, and I'm like, my common phrase was, you have merely felt the tip of life's dick. It was very crude and vulgar, but in some cases, some of us as we get older do get royally shafted. That doesn't, mental health is relevant to the age you are. So the things that you're stressed out about is in whatever age group you are perfectly relevant and valid. As you get older, you'll go back and realise, we all do it, as you get older. I'm 33 this year, and I look back and the shit I was worried about at 23, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, if only I knew. I was a dad at 23, so I've had to do a lot of growing up and stuff. So maybe it's like, when I was 18, the problems I had at 18, God, I wish I had those now. But there were still problems. As I said, there's no such thing as a small problem. The problems that my daughters have when they're trying to process things are very real, and they're very emotional. Maybe they're not quite as mature enough, and they haven't understood that there's greater things to be maybe worried about, or that they can overcome so they don't feel so bad about it. But until you experience those things, they are going to be massive. And, your age does not determine the level of mental health you should have. You should only have a mild anxiety in your 20s. You can have severe anxiety when you hit your 30s, because then you've experienced a bit more and you should know. No, it doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. You will feel what you feel when you feel it, and the magnitude is the same no matter how old you get. Sometimes you may find that the things that did trigger you off don't anymore, but you found new triggers, because it's just how it goes. Someone once told me that I'm not bipolar, I'm just really bad at making up my mind. How does that even... That's just not even relevant to... Oh, God. Okay, so that's not even relevant to being bipolar. So bipolar is a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's one of the more major forms of depression. You have manic phases and depressive phases, which is basically the difference is your serotonin doesn't know which way to go. So when it's low, you feel very down, you feel very depressed, you don't do very much. And when you go up, you get a flood of serotonin, bang, and dopamine, and you are on top of the world. And the trouble is when you're manic, in a manic phase, they can last anything from a week to months on end, you're not making logical decisions. So therefore, you want to do everything. And people usually overspend, they can get into relationships that they shouldn't be into, they can leave relationships that they were fine in, and then what happens is after a while that drops, and then you regret all the decisions you made when you were manic, and you feel bad. Now the trouble is, you would rather be manic than depressed, and that sounds really strange. But when you're manic, you're feeling so good about everything that nothing's a bad idea. SSRIs, or serotonin secretion reuptake inhibitors, are basically designed to regulate. So when you are depressed on a serotonin scale, basically what happens is your body recycles your hormones. So you get a wash of serotonin over the brain. Your body then reabsorbs it, reuptakes it, and goes again. Now, if you have clinical depression, i.e., it's been diagnosed as a chemical imbalance, basically, in one stage, your body reuptakes serotonin too quickly, so you can't feel happy for very long, or you don't feel reward for very long, because your body goes, yeah, great, it's too quick, don't register it. When you're manic, your body is just washing your brain with serotonin, and it's not reuptaking it, it's just staying there, so you're constantly on a high, like, fucking hell, this is brilliant. And you do anything to keep it up. And this is where the trouble is, when people realise that some medications can regulate the manic feeling rather than you being up and down, sometimes they don't take it because they like the high feeling, and everybody does. That's why you get high, because you like the feeling that it gives you, because you don't like the other feeling when you don't have it. Medication is tricky, and you should always be willing to ask and assess about your medication. You know, it is your right to understand what's going on, and if you're not happy with what it's making you feel, or sometimes, you know, antidepressants don't make you feel anything, they numb you out, which may be great to get over something, but you don't want to feel numb. We are supposed to feel feelings, so just be advised. I can't give anybody advice on medication. That's not my job, but I can obviously say to you, like, look, come on, you should always be willing to ask and discuss, because it's your body, and you know, you have a right to know, and any person prescribing medicine will be happy to talk to you about it. You know, they want to give you options, and there's things you can do. Oh, Jesus Christ. Fucking hell. Sorry, this was a horrible one. If you really wanted to be dead, you would be. Said by ambulance driver, a psychiatrist in hospital, and also by a member of the crisis team. That's generally awful. Again, the aim of suicide, again, isn't necessarily to die. It's to stop the pain that you're feeling. And if you can't figure out how to do that, then taking your life may be the option to do it. Again, in first-hand experience with somebody that is in my immediate family that tried to do it, they turned around and said afterwards that they knew it was a stupid thing to do. They just didn't want to be in pain anymore. It's real. Suicide is not a coward's way out. It's actually so hard to do. Like, I can't even begin to explain to you how much the body does not want to be dead. It doesn't. When you actively do something, which is why, you know, you feel pain for a reason, because it doesn't want you don't want to do something. So if someone cuts their wrists, for example, the amount of pain you have to ignore to get a cut deep enough to do the damage that you're aiming to do. There's a lot of mechanisms you're absolutely getting rid of at this point. It's the same thing as, you know, drowning yourself, should I say. You know, that's actually not impossible, because your body would shut off before it happens. That's a biological thing. People taking pills, they do it because they know they're not going to feel any pain, or at least they hope they don't. They just want to end the suffering. It has nothing to do with about being dead. It's about not being in pain anymore. And for somebody, 4 fucking people, or 3 people, to turn around and say, if you really wanted to be dead, you'd be dead, as to say, you just did it for attention. Do a better job next time. I don't understand how these are just shit human beings. They're just fucking awful, and they don't understand anything. That's not how it works. It's not why you do it. Some people do hurt themselves for attention, but you can tell those people that do that, because guess what? They'll tell you that they're doing it for attention. I've come across people before that have actively just shown me the rest and gone, look what I did. And it's like, that's purely for attention, because you want someone to ask you why. Now, I've come across many people that have self-harmed, and they do it in discrete places because it's a control mechanism. By putting themselves through pain, they feel that they're in control, or they're deserving something, or they're punishing themselves for something that they feel that they're responsible for. When you go to the point where you're actively trying to end your life, you do hope you're going to be found. Of course you don't want to die. You're just hoping that maybe if you put this action in place that maybe the pain will stop, or maybe somebody will actually find you and help you. Suicide does one of two things. It opens up a cry for help, which again, our suicide services aren't 100%, or you end the suffering. There is only two aims. Now, there are people, depending on how many pills you take, when we're talking about this person's clearly decided that, I'm out, I'm done, can't do this anymore. I don't know it doesn't say what method they use, but they've clearly done it with the end purpose of not being on this planet anymore. And to say that if you really wanted to be dead, you would be though, wouldn't you? Like, we wouldn't have had to come out if you'd actually done it properly. Fucking hell. Just, oh. Okay, nearly coming to the end, guys. Well, Jesus Christ, no, it just keeps going on. Okay, let's, because we're coming up to an hour now, so let's have a look at a few more, shall we? Okay. I honestly can't believe how a doctor could talk about illness like that. They are supposed to know what we go through. Okay, so okay, that's just a statement made to somebody else. Okay, and actually, it's a good one to come up because it's like, again, doctors, especially, and this is pretty much UK based. Okay, I can't really talk about overseas. Maybe I'll talk to my aunt when I go out and see her next. GPs that you go see at your doctor's surgery are not mental health specialists. They can only refer you maybe medication or see that you go see somebody. You are better off talking to therapists, psychiatrists, but making sure that they specialize in what you think you're feeling. I say what you think you're feeling, not because I don't think you're feeling anything, but closer to the situation that you are feeling gravitated towards you. So is it an eating disorder? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it PTSD? Whatever, you know what I mean? It's not, I'm saying like, you think, because you may not know, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you may not know that what you have is PTSD. You may not know what you have is anxiety. You may not know what you have is an eating disorder. You may not know what you exactly have, but you know you have something. So you've got to gravitate towards the person who you think probably is closest to what you're experiencing, and then that person can either go, yes, you're right, you are completely right, this is what you are doing, or actually, no, you need to go and see this person. If they say they don't know and then still keep talking to you and stuff, like, you need to be wary, because you should be seeing somebody that actually knows how to deal with the incident you've got. Because again, therapists specialize in different areas because that's what you end up doing. To be a general therapist is great and you can help lots of people, but you're not going to help them as intently as maybe if you specialize in something. Okay, I told my manager I was really struggling with my eating disorder. It was causing breakdowns at work, and he just turned to me and said, just go upstairs and get a meal down you. Come back and you'll be fine. Then went on to say that personal problems shouldn't be brought to work. Whew. Okay, so most places, and I've worked in places, I won't name it in case they decide to come at me for it, where it was told that you leave your personal shit at home. Now, in regards to having a spat with your missus or your child, or things that can be resolved with that person or object or things, whatever, sometimes, yes, depending on what you're dealing with, can be maybe not brought into work. Basically, the employee's looking after themselves at this point. They're not thinking. And anybody who says don't bring your shit to work, you're like, well, great, what a company. When it comes to your own personal mental health, you have no choice. You can't leave yourself at home. You can't just separate yourself. I mean, some of us wish we really could. Sometimes I wish I could leave some of my shit in a box somewhere and never fucking deal with it again. But that's not how it works. And eating disorders are something that you can't just turn on and off. They flare up as they do. And to tell somebody who has an eating disorder, oh, just go up and get a meal in, yeah. I mean, a lot of this is stemmed by a complete lack of understanding. Now, in the cases in which therapists are saying it and stuff, it's like, well, these are shit therapists and they need to really think about their job. But for the most part, the layperson will just try and get you, like, you got an eating disorder, you don't eat enough, well, go and eat a meal then. Yeah, because that's how you fix it. Anxiety can cause issues as well with food and breakdowns and stuff. I've worked with somebody who's a lovely lady, and her anxiety, and it was proper anxiety. Like, if you want to know what anxiety looks like, this is what it did. And she wouldn't eat because we had some vegans that worked at the gym. And she was worried that whatever she ate might offend them. And to which one they all turned around and said, look, we're really not worried about it. You should eat. And she collapsed because she wasn't eating, because she was so worried about offending anybody's other sensibilities. Now, nobody had ever made her feel that way, but that's what anxiety does. It creates worst case scenarios over and over. So with eating disorders, you do have to be very careful. And, to say, just get a meal down you, especially if I'm guessing their manager should really know that they have an eating disorder. It probably would have come up before. So to use that kind of callous approach is just shit, really. I'm going to wrap it up there because, we could go on forever. Hopefully I've covered quite a lot of things here. And the main aim of this podcast, because when I saw this, it broke my heart to think that people have been told this, and this is maybe the reason that people aren't getting help, because they've just experienced the worst possible answers. This is what I do with my clients. I would say I'm an integrated therapist. I generally deal with women, but I do deal with men as well. We deal with anxiety and lack of confidence, and usually in a situation where people are basically taking a piss and walking all over them, and we try and get them to claim more back for themselves and level the playing field a bit. Not to be combative and stuff, but basically just go, no, this has to work out for me as well. A lot of people don't get help because they don't think help is out there. It is. If you even just aren't sure where to go, come and work with me and we'll get you started to that point. It's not a case of I'm not here to try and get you to stay with me for as long as possible. You're with me until you feel that you can go, and I'll happily send you on your way to wherever you need to go. It may just be that talking to somebody impartial with no emotional connection to your issue can help you better understand it, so you can go off and find the help that you need. Please don't ever shy away and not get help because you think that you're the problem. You have a problem. You are not the problem. When you are in front of somebody that will explain things like that to you, you will hopefully feel a bit better about going and seeking help and stuff. And seeking help is how we get better. Sometimes it isn't due to talking. Sometimes it may be action. Sometimes it may be finding the right person and realizing that the people that you've been going to and getting bad advice from are just people that aren't equipped to deal with it, and we need to find other people. If you do ever have any questions, if you want to bring anything up that was said, if any of these things have been directly something you've been part of and my answers made you feel better, please let me know. I'd love to know. But if you need any help, please reach out, and I'm always on hand to help anybody that needs it. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll get through it together. I'll speak to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.